Okay, so have you ever, like, really sat down and tried to think about time, like, what it actually is?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things you can't help but think about sometimes, right?
Yeah, and it feels so constant, so, like, always moving forward. But what if we have it all wrong? What if everything we think we know about time is totally off?
Well, we might have to rethink some things for sure.
Yeah, and that's what we're diving into today with the work of physicist and mathematician Sabine Hossenfelder.
Ah, Sabine Hossenfelder. Yeah, she always has some interesting takes.
She really does, and one of the big ones we're unpacking today is this idea from an interview we have with her, where she talks about how the past, the present, the future, they might all exist at the same time.
Okay, so we're talking about the block universe kind of thing here.
Exactly, the block universe, which
Uh-huh.
is a pretty mind-bending concept to wrap your head around, but it all starts with this idea that our experience of now, this very moment, isn't some kind of universal truth.
Right, like what we perceive as now isn't necessarily the same now for someone or something else elsewhere.
Exactly. And to understand how we get there, we need to touch on Einstein's theory of special relativity, which would
Mm.
be a bit of a brain twister.
Yeah, relativity is one of those things that just kind of breaks your brain a little bit when you first try to really understand it.
Totally, but that's why we have you here.
Hopefully, I can help make it a little less brain breaking, but no promises.
Haha. Well, I appreciate the honesty.
So, at its core, special relativity is based on this idea. The speed of light in a vacuum is constant for everyone.
No matter how fast you're moving, even if you're approaching the speed of light stays the same.
Exactly. It doesn't speed up and slow down relative to you. It's always the same. And that seemingly simple idea has some really wild consequences for how time itself works.
Right, because our intuition tells us that if we're moving towards something, it should seem to be approaching faster, right?
Exactly. Our everyday experience is based on things moving at relatively slow speeds compared to light. But when we start talking about things moving at or close to the speed of light, our intuition just doesn't cut it.
So how does this constant speed of light actually affect time? Hossenfelder uses a great example in the interview, talking about a moving train that I think really helps illustrate this.
Yeah, the train example is a classic. It's simple, but really gets to the heart of how relative time can be. So, picture this. You're standing on a platform, and a train is speeding past.
Oh, I can see it.
Now, imagine that at the exact moment the middle of the train passes you, two lights flash, one at the front of the train and one at the back.
Okay, so far so good.
Now, because you're standing still relative to the train, you would see those two lights flash at the same time.
Yeah, that makes it, they'd be equidistant for me, so I'd see the light from both at the same moment.
Right, but here's where it gets weird. Someone on that train, someone who's moving towards the light at the front of the train, wouldn't see those two flashes as simultaneous. They'd actually see the light from the front of the train before they see the light from the back.
Wait, really? Why would that be?
Because for them, for the person on the train, the light from the front has less distance to cover since they are moving towards it at speed. But remember, the speed of light is constant, so it doesn't get there faster for the person on the train. It just has to travel less far from their perspective.
Oh, I see. So what we perceive as happening at the same time simultaneously can actually be different depending on our relative motion. That's wild.
It is pretty wild, right? And it completely upends our common sense understanding of time. And that's where this idea of a universal now, this shared present moment, starts to fall apart. There is no single now that everyone agrees on. It's relative.
Okay, so there's no universal clock for the universe. Time is relative. Okay. That's a lot to take in, but I think I'm starting to get it, I think.
It's a lot to wrap your head around for sure.
So if there is no universal now, does that mean, like my grandmother who is no longer with us, does that mean like she still exists in the same way that, say, this water bottle here exists right now?
Wow, that's a really interesting question, and it gets to the heart of what Hossenfelder is suggesting. Mathematically speaking, Einstein's theories don't give any special significance to this particular moment that we're experiencing right now compared to any other point in time.
So in a way, every moment, past, present, and future, could be considered equally real.
That's essentially what Hossenfelder argues, though she'd likely point out it's not exactly that simple. We experience our local now very differently from these distant events in both space and time. But when we're talking about the nature of time itself, within the framework of these theories, there's no real reason to think that this moment, right here, right now, is any more special than any other point in all of time.
Okay, so we've established that our usual way of thinking about time might be a little flawed. But what does this actually mean for our understanding of the universe as a whole? I think it's time we talk about the block universe. And thankfully, Hossenfelder uses a surprisingly effective analogy, a sliced sausage.
Ah, yes, the sausage analogy. I've been waiting for this.
I know you have, and trust me, it's a good one. So, we've established that our usual way of thinking about time might be a little flawed, but what does this actually mean for our understanding of the universe as a whole? I think it's time we talk about the block universe. And thankfully, Hossenfelder uses a surprisingly effective analogy, a sliced sausage.
Ah, yes, the sausage analogy. I've been waiting for this.
I know you have, and trust me, it's a good one. So imagine a sausage, right? And this sausage represents all of time, from the Big Bang to the very end, if there even is an end.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Keep going.
Now, each slice of this sausage, that represents a single moment in time. But here's the kicker. The entire sausage, every single slice from beginning to end, it all exists at once. No one slice is any more real than any other.
Okay, so it's like our experience of time, of moments passing, of moving from the past through the present and into the future, it's just an illusion. We're just sliding along this pre-existing sausage of time.
That's a really interesting way to put it. And it gets to the heart of what the block universe concept is trying to convey.
And this kind of makes me think about determinism, you know? Like, if the entire sausage of time already exists, does that mean everything is predetermined?
Ah, determinism. The idea that everything that will ever happen is already set in stone. It's a question that's been around for centuries. If we knew the exact initial conditions of the universe, every single particle, where it was, how fast it was moving at the very beginning, and all the laws of physics, could we theoretically predict the entire course of history?
Every event, every decision, all pre-decided. It's a pretty wild thought if you really sit down and consider it.
A universe where everything is already written, so to speak. Yeah, it does make you think. But surely it can't be that simple, right?
Well, you're right to be hesitant. Determinism, in its purest form, it struggles to account for a rather significant factor: quantum mechanics.
Ah, quantum mechanics, the realm of the very, very small, where the rules of reality seem to get a little fuzzy. I think we need to dive into that a bit, don't you?
We do, because it gets to the heart of how randomness and uncertainty operate in the universe. See, at the subatomic level, things aren't so neat and predictable. Instead of smooth, predictable movements, we have quantum events, these strange, unpredictable jumps and fluctuations that seem to defy the classical physics we're used to.
Yeah, quantum mechanics is definitely one of those things that make you realize how much we don't know about how the universe really works. So how does this randomness, this inherent uncertainty at the quantum level, how does it impact the neat picture of determinism?
It throws a wrench in the works, that's for sure. Because if some events are fundamentally random and unpredictable, even in principle, then even if we knew everything about the universe at the Big Bang, we still couldn't predict the future with absolute certainty.
Okay, so quantum mechanics introduces an element of chance, of possibility, that throws a bit of a curveball into the deterministic view of the universe. And this brings us to the question of free will, doesn't it?
Exactly. Because if there's true randomness baked into the fabric of reality, does that mean we have genuine freedom to make choices? It's a question that's been debated for millennia with no easy answers.
It feels like if anything could salvage our sense of free will in a potentially predetermined universe, it would be this wild, unpredictable world of quantum mechanics.
You'd think so, right? But it's not that straightforward. Hossenfelder, she doesn't shy away from this debate. In fact, she has some very thought-provoking views on free will. Even with quantum randomness, she argues that true free will, in the sense that we are the sole authors of our actions, completely unbound by any prior cause, might still be an illusion.
So she's not necessarily saying free will doesn't exist, but rather that quantum randomness doesn't automatically equal free will, as we might traditionally understand it.
Exactly. She actually suggests that perhaps, rather than getting bogged down in this endless loop of whether or not free will exists, we should focus on the reality of our experience.
So regardless of whether our choices are ultimately predetermined or influenced by some cosmic dice roll at the quantum level, we still experience making decisions, we face consequences for those decisions, and we live our lives based on what we believe to be our choices.
Right. It's about acknowledging the subjective reality of our experience, regardless of what the underlying nature of reality might actually be.
That's a really interesting perspective. So if we accept, for a moment, that our experience of time might be an illusion, and this debate about free will might be a philosophical dead end, should we just throw our hands up and say nothing matters? Surrender to the vastness and incomprehensibility of it all. That's a tempting thought, I have to admit. But I don't think Hossenfelder would let us off that easily, would she?
No, no, she wouldn't. She'd want us to keep grappling with these big questions.
Exactly. And that leads us to something else she talks about, the search for a theory of everything in physics.
Ah, yes. The holy grail of physics. A single theory that explains, well, everything.
It's a big goal, to say the least. And Hossenfelder has even written a whole book about it, Lost in Math, How Beauty Leads Physics Astray.
Oh, yeah. That's a great book, though it definitely makes you think about some of the fundamental assumptions driving certain areas of physics.
It does, and the title alone suggests that she's not necessarily convinced we're on the right track.
So what's the problem with looking for a theory of everything? I mean, it sounds like a pretty worthwhile goal, right?
It does, and for centuries, physicists have been driven by this desire for a unified theory, one that elegantly explains all the fundamental forces of the universe, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, all in one neat package.
And there's definitely a certain appeal to that, right? Finding that one elegant equation that explains it all.
Oh, absolutely. There's an elegance to it, a simplicity that's really seductive.
And we've seen this before, haven't we? Einstein's theories of relativity, they're incredibly elegant, almost beautiful in their simplicity. They really are. And they completely revolutionized our understanding of the universe, Space and time, gravity, it's all connected in this really beautiful way.
Right. But Hossenfelder seems to be suggesting that this pursuit of beauty in physics, this drive for elegant equations and unified theories, that it might actually be leading us astray in some ways. So when does this search for beauty go too far?
That's the million-dollar question. Because while elegance and simplicity can be indicators of truth in science, they can also be misleading.
So how do we know if we're on the right track? How do we know if we're letting our desire for a neat, elegant universe blind us to a potentially messier reality?
It's tough, and Hossenfelder is particularly critical of how this is playing out in particle physics.
Yeah, in the interview, she doesn't hold back, talking about how some particle physicists are basically making up new particles to fit their theories.
Yeah, and she makes a valid point. There's this tendency to propose these new particles based on theoretical models, often without sufficient experimental evidence. And these models, well, they're often driven by a desire for mathematical elegance, for symmetry, It's like they're trying to force the universe to fit into these neat little boxes.
And she's suggesting that maybe the universe doesn't fit into a neat little box.
Maybe not. What if the universe is just inherently messy and complex, and our insistence on finding these beautiful, elegant theories is actually preventing us from seeing what's really out there?
It's a humbling thought, isn't it? The idea that our human brains, wired for pattern recognition and simple explanations, might be fundamentally unequipped to truly grasp the universe's complexity.
It is humbling, but it's also exciting in a way.
Okay, I see that. It opens up the realm of possibilities, right? But where does that leave us? If we may never find this theory of everything, should we just give up trying to understand the universe?
Not at all. And Hossenfelder wouldn't say that either. In fact, despite her skepticism about finding a single, all-encompassing theory, she still sees so much value in the pursuit of knowledge itself. The journey is just as important as the destination,
It's about the search itself, the act of asking questions, of pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Exactly. It's about embracing the mystery, the inherent wonder of a universe that constantly surprises us.
That's a great note to end on. It's been quite the deep dive today. We've explored the nature of time, the possibility of a block universe, the limits of knowledge, and the inherent wonder of the search for understanding. So if our experience of time is an illusion, as Hossenfelder suggests, does that change how we should live our lives? Something to ponder as we navigate our own personal journeys in this vast and mysterious universe. Thanks for joining us.